with Ebola. As we speak, in the Greater Kampala, in the last 48 hours, 4 more cases have been registered positive of Ebola virus, the Sudan strain. And so that is challenging for our health sector. And the big question is, how worried should we be and what should be next, not just for the Ministry of Health, but also for the country in terms of governance, leadership, as well as for ourselves individually. But here to have these conversations in detail is Dr. Kizza Besigye. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Very good morning, Priscilla, and nice to be at the NTV always. A very good morning to all the NTV viewers, wherever you are joining into this program.
Okay, all right. As we got into our Kickstarter, Doctor, we have been informed of the passing of Jakana Naduli, who's the son of Haji Naduli, and it is sad. Found dead in his home, 37 years of age. He's been a political activist. He's been recently in prison related to such matters, and today he's no more. What are your comments on that?
Well, extremely sad at various levels. First of all, of course, Alhaj Abdul Naduli is somebody that I have known for a very long time, right from the Bush War days, and you know, somebody that has been supporting the government, sometimes overzealously, you know, and I have had occasions to really fight with him, especially when he was the chairman of Luwero district. But over and beyond all that, Abdul Naduli is a good man, you know, the wrong side of politics, but a good man that I have known all this long. And so it is very, very sad that his son, a son of, you know, somebody who is so supportive of the movement, was treated the way he was, you know, aggressed very badly because of nothing else except his political views. It's not that he had committed a crime, attacked anybody, or injured anybody in any way. It was just political views that attracted the mistreatment, the kidnapping, which everybody was, you know, aware of, illegal detention, torture, and now eventually death. And this death, of course, I have not yet heard what eventually caused the death. I'm sure there will be a post-mortem done, but there is absolutely no way that death can be separated from his immediate past treatment, regardless of whether they find that death was caused by a heart failure or whatever. It has to be related with the intense torture, both psychological and physical torture that he has just gone through. And many people have been tortured and nobody has been held responsible. We saw here not long ago, Kakwenza, who was picked from his home by security people, taken to SFC dungeons, tortured greatly, brought to court oozing pus and blood and so on, and in spite of his condition, remanded to Kitalia before he was eventually granted bail and now lives abroad. Nobody has been arraigned before any court for torturing him. And so has been the case with many others. You remember the chairman, NRM chairman of Kamwenge. who was also tortured and eventually, when exposed to the media, was taken to Nakasero Hospital and so on and stayed there for a long time. I don't know where that chairman is. Nobody has ever been brought to court for that. Many people have died in detention. Some have now forgotten a young man called Mamenero, who was tortured at the CMI. That time, I think it was still called DMI, here at their headquarters, until he died. And there was a report on that, you know. Nothing, nobody was prosecuted for his death. And so has been all these hundreds and hundreds of people that are being kidnapped on a daily basis, taken to unknown places, some found dead in different parts. This kind of criminality must come to an end, and it will not bring itself to an end. And so, you know, it's extremely sad to hear the news of the death of a young person, 37 years of age, with a family, with, you know, all people who have been having hopes in him. I must convey my deepest sympathy and condolences to the family of Alhaj Abdul Naduli, to the relatives and friends. He was a supporter of the National Unity Platform. I condole the National Unity Platform and all his colleagues that he was associating with. It's very sad for the country. I think it's a wake-up call. You know, I've been telling people, wake up. It's a wake-up call that this will happen to you. Whether you say, I am an NRM supporter, it will come to you. Criminality has no borders, you know. We must all unite and say enough is enough.
Okay, doctor, so enough should be enough. You're talking about wake-up call, but you've also mentioned very interesting things. You've talked about the wrong side of politics. Anyone who steps on the wrong side of politics ends up suffering for their political views.
Yes,
and also in relation to what happened to him prior to his last days, the abductions, the drone system has come back. Now, we thought that the drone system was in the era of the elections, before, during, and after. But now we are in a political free time. And why are we having the resurgency of the drones taking people because of their views of being on the wrong side of politics?
You see, regime survival is the full-time, fast, and literally only priority of the Museveni junta. Regime survival. It's not just at elections. It's a continuous engagement. It's a continuous preoccupation. It uses many levers, you know, like buying opposition members. That is a continuous thing, you know. Compromising people, you know, terrorizing people is not only through drones. It is a whole range of, you know, people who are being sacked from jobs because they were suspected, simply suspected of associating in a certain way, people whose businesses are destroyed, people, you know, the whole government is literally engaged in nothing else but pursuing anything that can threaten the regime, and making sure that it is crushed. And so the use of force and terror is systemic. It is continuous. It is in the whole system. In fact, we should worry because about 2 weeks ago, I saw a launch, a very clearly strange launch, certainly suspect, where they were saying that everybody arrested, any suspect who is arrested and taken to any police station will be forcefully tested for malaria, for TB, and for HIV. Anybody that if they can, so whoever is suspected, and of course any citizen can be arrested and taken to a police station, and they will forcefully push a needle into your body. What that portends, first of all, of course, that itself is criminal. You know, it's illegal, but it was launched formally and even ceremonially by some people who should be themselves taken to court, you know, for launching such a criminal project, such an illegal project, you know. But I worry because I haven't even seen Parliament, you know, talk about that kind of criminal project, which can be used against anybody. Even if you are NRM, just, you know, like we are talking about this, you know, because poisoning is no longer a secret weapon of the regime, you know. Many people have died in ways to suggest that they have been poisoned. Indeed, some even through tests have been said to have interacted with poisons. So we need to worry, you know,
okay.
All of us. And so it's not just the drones, it's the whole system of criminality intended to preserve a regime in power. A regime that is unpopular, a regime that uses force to remain in power, and that takes you to you know, the source of those drones even since 2021 and the killings of 2020, which themselves have never been, nobody has ever been arraigned in court over the killings of 2020.
Doctor, speaking of the regime using all means necessary to retain power for as long as they can, one of those is, of course, trying to get opposition into bed with them. Most recent, of course, is the DP party leader, Norbert Mao, who is now the Minister of Constitutional Affairs. Looking at the political spectrum as it stands right now, the DP-NRM agreement stepping into such a circumference of contention, basing on the words of both parties in this conversation. What is your perspective on this relationship that has been marred, for that matter, on the side of DP, and also the interpretation of then DP leadership crossing into the current government?
Well, what has happened to my brother Norbert is really nothing new. It shouldn't occupy a lot of space for media. It is an ordinary process of co-optation, of co-opting leaders who are opposed to the regime to cooperate with it. And that has been going on for as long as this regime has been in the government. Of course, as it has become more and more dirty, you know, with more and more blood on its hands and more, you know, vicious in its pursuit of staying in power, it's now, it is increasingly more, it takes more courage to join it. You know, it takes, and Robert must be a very courageous person. I must give it to him to join the NRM junta at this stage. And so I think even what, you know, he was talking about, I have an agreement, it is part of, you know, easing
The ones that have been created. Okay, all right. Now this, of course, brings into question the state of opposition in the country presently. You get to have people asking themselves, so is opposition here to serve self-interest, or is it here to serve the people of Uganda?
Priscilla, I don't know how many times argued and made presentations that we must change the nomenclature, the naming of who is opposing the junta. This whole thing of opposition and opposition parties is misleading, because those terms are used in systems which are democratic, where you have government party and opposition parties, and where opposition parties are, governments in waiting, where the argument is on which policies will best serve the population, presenting these policies to the population, so that the population from time to time chooses. If yours are not serving us well, they choose the other one. And that a change of party in government does not change the system of the state. The state remains there. The institutions of the state remain the same. So you have institutions of the state that serve under any party. So if there was a national unity platform government, the military of the state would serve it in exactly the same way, with exactly the same respect and obedience, as if there was an NRM government, as if there was an FDC government, as if there was a DP government. The institutions of state would be neutral and serve these competently. That you have a police which will respect all these as their leaders. That does not exist here. What we have here is the NRM state. It is the state. So the police is NRM. The UPDF is NRM. The Electoral Commission is NRM. The Bank of in fact, not NRM. Again, NRM is misleading, because even NRM and all these institutions were captured by Museveni and his family. So they are family, it's a family project. And so talking about opposition and government is totally misleading. What we have are those who captured the state and those and the captive state.
Doctor, allow me to bring into picture this conversation. Most recently, we did have the UK Parliament coming out to share their stance on our ECOP, the pipeline. And they made their reservations and asked that Uganda halt that work until considerations of human rights abuse, environmental abuse, among other things, are cleared and sorted out of the way. Now, we do have the National Unity Platform stating that they actually did invite this UK representation to Uganda so that they can give their observations and their conclusive remarks on the project, so as to quote-unquote save Ugandans. But some Ugandans feel that that was a selfish move for them to do without consultation of the many Ugandans, as they say, power for the people. In that kind of scenario, what would have been the better democratic alternative that they would have used to still address the matter at hand?
Yes, you are taking me into too many things at the same time. We didn't quite put to bed the whole question of these parties that we are talking about here. Let me come to that. But let me first simply say that all the institutions, whether in the state, whether outside the state, in a captive state, are all captive. So political parties that you hear, opposition parties, they are also captured. Like the Electoral Commission is captured, like the Bank of Uganda is captured, like the police is captured. political parties also are captured. If they are not yet captured, they will be captured. Even if you form a party today, after some time, it will be captured because of the dynamics of the country. And that's why the project in Uganda is not contestation of ideas for the population to choose, because the population has no power to choose. It has no vote. The project in Uganda for the captured people of Uganda is to liberate themselves first. Once they have liberated themselves, then they can create an environment where the contestation of ideas will happen, where there will be a ruling party and opposition parties. That situation does not exist today. Now, turning back to the question of ECOP, well, frankly, I don't know what the role of National Unity Platform in regards to what the European Parliament resolutions are, whether the resolutions were acting on a petition by the National Unity Platform, I'm not aware. But it does not need any solicitation of ideas in Uganda to know that people who captured the country should not be the ones to exploit our oil. That is the most critical point for me. Forget about the other issues of the environment, of the human rights that are associated with the project, you know, the payment of land where the pipe is going to pass, and the injustices that have been involved with land acquisition. All those are there. But the most critical thing for Ugandans is that our resources should be able to benefit all equally, or equitably at least. That can only happen when all Ugandans have a voice on how that money will be used. As long as we don't have a voice, as long as the use of force to govern the country still exists, which we were talking about just now, you know, where violation of rights of those who try to speak is the order of the day, it means that oil cannot benefit Ugandans. In fact, if it flows into the pockets of those who are holding the country hostage. And once it reaches the pockets of those who are holding the country hostage, they will have greater ammunition to even make it far more difficult for Ugandans to ever speak. So, oil flowing in the current circumstances is going to be the biggest curse for this country. You remember some time back when there was celebration that Uganda Airlines is coming back in the skies. Some of us said that if that airline resumes under the current system, a few people will be laughing all the way to the banks, while the rest of the country will be crying.
And it will be their money that they'll be laughing with.
Of course.
Okay.
That is what is happening every day. All Ugandans lose, I think, about $1 billion shillings every day onto Uganda Airline alone. Every single day. Today we are going to lose 1 billion, all of us, to Uganda Airline. Quite a few people are drumming where the billions are going.
Which in the total year would be about 360
yes.
Ugandan shillings.
That is the situation if we now go to oil. A few people will be well off, while the rest of the people will sink below where we are 1,000 times.
All right, the European Union has put an issue of human rights, and they have also related it to climate change effects regarding to the oil pipeline.
Those are legitimate,
yeah,
but not the most critical, and they can be mitigated. You see,
and the question is, how can they be mitigated?
You see, the money, control of environmental damage has ways that it can be instituted and regulated. The problem is that any such systems that can be regulated to minimize the impact will be there, but it can be minimized, can only be minimized if there is an effective, accountable government. You have seen here what has happened. There is NEMA, but all the wetlands have been destroyed under the watch and by the people who are in government themselves, who should be the ones protecting it. Who is destroying the forests of Uganda before you even talk about the oil? You know, all the forests in Bunyoro right now, they are destroying forests that they are growing sugarcane. Mabira, you remember the fight and death of people to try and save Mabira. Mabira was temporarily saved, but it's still being encroached. The other forest covers in West Nile, which have been decimated by people in government. The destruction of trees on mountains that has led to all these mudslides and so on and so forth. All that is unrelated to oil because we have a regime that is not accountable to people. So all these things happen, but there is there is no cost to them. You can't say we shall vote them out. You can't say. So that is where it is extremely important that oil should not be considered for exploitation until there is an accountable system of government, which, if it is accountable and people don't want it to exploit any resource, then it may not. But if it is to be exploited, then it would be exploited with all the necessary precautions that are monitorable.
Okay, so we're looking for accountability, we're looking for transparency, and we're looking for inclusion of all Ugandans to have their stake and their say in what happens to their especially natural resources. Okay, away from that, you have talked about effective governance. Let's draw lessons from the UK. As we speak, Liz Truss is no longer the Prime Minister, 45 days into taking that seat of power, and a few mistakes here and there in the policies that she allowed to pass. Cutting taxes, and that caused people in the UK to take power back to themselves and say, no, if this is the direction, we won't even just accept it as a mistake. Please go out with your mistake. What lessons can we draw from such governance?
Well, you see, a couple of lessons. First of all, the reason that Liz is you know, one of many prime ministers in the recent past. In fact, I saw somebody make fun of it by saying that he has a daughter who has seen 4 prime ministers, 4 ministers of interior, which is one of their major portfolios, 3 chancellors, 2 prime ministers, and 2 monarchies in 4 months. All of these have happened in 4 months. Her daughter is...
and in Uganda, we're about 40 years, and some of us have only seen one of any of these things.
Yes, yes. So the thing is, all these changes are taking place, but Britain is stable. The UK is stable. Why? Because of the strong institutions. So political leaders can come and go, but institutions are there and strong. One of the institutions that has been at the center of all this is the Bank of England, which regulates money and monetary policy for the UK. And when you as Bank of England is independent. It cannot be ordered by the Prime Minister. You know, just like here where, you know, the central bank now without a governor for a year, you know, you can remain like that. There you cannot have a Bank of England without a governor for a day. You know, it's critical and the whole country depends on it. Here, the Bank of Uganda is totally useless. It's just, you know, like a handkerchief of Mr. Museveni, which he uses. So there, when the Prime Minister made her policies and said, you know, I am going to give, to cut cost of energy so that people can pay less bills for their power, for their gas, and so on, that is money which has to be raised. If it was being paid and you are now saying people don't pay it, it must come from somewhere. And then she cut taxes. Cutting taxes, when you want to cut expenditure of people, means that you still have far less money to use in whatever you are doing. So that immediately caused you know, changes in the way people were responding in the market. Inflation immediately rose. So the Bank of England had to raise their lending rates, which then immediately impacted on people's interest rates for their houses, for the mortgages where they live. And they cannot.
So what was meant to be a salvation pit?
Yes, and they could not afford it. So people said no. People raised, you know, and so the person who started it all by making policies that were not going to be sustainable was forced to now try to revise them and eventually to go. So this is how systems of government should operate. Having strong institutions, having people with voices who can say, no, this is not acceptable, and it is responded to, and then having political parties that propose these policies. If the Conservatives continue along the way they have done, they will lose power to Labour. Which was, of course, in the government previously. So that's how democratic systems work. And you are saying, what lessons do we draw from them? For us, we are before all that happens. So all it should encourage us to do is to fight harder and quicker to have voices for the people of Uganda that can be heard, to build institutions that can be strong and independent, and on the basis of which then we can have political parties that contest in their opinions, in their views and policies, and serve the population to the best of their abilities.
Doctor, you're referring to this, but it more or less requires alternative governments. And what we see in Uganda currently, political parties in the opposition, or what should be alternative democracy, do tend to have a funny system. If you and I disagree, then I'm going to go and make my own political party with the views that I believe will take Uganda forward. If the people who join me that disagree, then it's going to have a continuous chain, henceforth having so many political parties but not having the opposition or the alternative democracy that you earlier talked about. So with that present state of politics in the opposition, how are we going to push
You know, you see, if there is a free,
to be able to
if there is freedom
of voice,
you see, if there is freedom, so first of all, in order to liberate ourselves and have the freedom to get these views contest freely in the market, we now don't have to function primarily in all these parties. We now need unity of all captives, regardless of which party they belong to. We now need unity to first liberate ourselves. Because what constrains all of us, whether in parties or no party or whatever, is the absence of unity, I mean of freedom, where we have a free voice, where the voice can be heard and respected, the absence of the rule of law, where we are all equal before the law. You know, what we were discussing earlier, that some can just arrest you, torture you, kill you, and nothing happens, you know. And so we live in a country where some are above the law, where some cannot even access the law. So that is the environment we must fight for first, that we become equal citizens. We are not citizens. We don't have citizenship rights. We must first become citizens. Then we create a regulating environment, framework, a regulating framework, a constitution for ourselves who are free. Okay. And then we build institutions that are provided in the constitution, and then we can have the political parties which are outside the state that are contesting in these views. Now, if we are there, it doesn't matter having 100 parties, because they are in the market. It's like a marketplace. You know, anybody can bring a product to the market. What will sort you out is which product is selling, which product has attraction to people. Those who are not subscribed to will die a natural death, and eventually you will remain with a few political parties. It is the same as in any other market. You see, where companies unite, because individually they cannot compete in the market, so they unite and form bigger companies. It is the same thing that happens in a free political environment. Political parties coalesce, and eventually you have you know, just 2 or 3 or something like that.
We sort of saw a similar picture most recently mid this year, because of the many by-elections that were happening left, right and center, and how opposition was continuously mistreated and mishandled in their participation freely in these elections. There was an agreement, a truce that was signed between some political parties and activists in line to what you are particularly saying. However, this was supposed to create hope, but some are saying that this hope seems to be short-lived, because everyone is back to their individual party business. And so for us to progress to what you're saying, collective effort seems to be dying. If that
no, it cannot die. It will never die as long as the people, you see, parties and leaders are simply acting on behalf of people. So unless people die, their aspirations cannot die. And so even when leaders, that's why leaders can betray people and sell themselves and desert and do all kinds of things. But as long as the popular demand is there, the struggle is alive. And what is happening, I think now, should already be fairly clear to the population, which is what I talked about also a little earlier, that these political parties will be infiltrated. No doubt, all of them will be infiltrated by the junta. So you'll find contestation in the political parties of those who are focused on ending junta gun rule and those who are cooperating. They are claiming to be a political opposition, but actually cooperating with the regime. These tendencies will be there in all our political parties. So what will happen, and which may confuse people, is that those tendencies within the political parties that are focused on change will coalesce. Those who are not focused on change may continue even opposing the ones who are coalescing to create change. So you'll find in DP there is a Mao group, there is an anti-Mao group. In UPC there is an Akena group, there is an anti-Akena group. And you'll find this in all these formations, the cooperating ones and the ones who want actually to liberate the country from the junta itself. So that is not, will not die because it is fed. So the ones cooperating with the regime are fed from the regime and persuaded by the regime. The ones anti the regime are fed from the population. So both will not die, but one will defeat the other. And I believe as day follows night, the population will prevail, will defeat those who are holding the population captive, as it has happened in all other countries.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. We're going to be taking a short breather, but of course what we're picking out from this part of the conversation is the fact that opposition is for all of us. We are in the alternative because we believe that we have alternative ideas, views and solutions to what could be happening in our country but is not okay with us. For example, service delivery. Is it coming to you or is it not coming to you? And what do you feel about it? And how can you help the government actually draw closer the service that you actually pay for through your taxes? Of course, we do have to tackle Ugandan opposition politics, and how should is it, and is it self-shouldeness or is it for the people to have them voice what is exactly happening to them on ground? Now we continue this conversation on our social media platforms, #morning@NTV, and you can feel free to drop the doctor a question at Priscilla. Nali will be able to call parties, and what's the picture that is presented by the opposition parties presently in Uganda? Numerous in number, but are they actually doing their activism for the people or self-interests? Now, Doctor has of course hinted on that, and of course we have to definitely look into the Ebola surge. This is not the first of its kind. The question is, what are the loopholes present? How can they be covered so that the health sector system can be able to handle these in the near future better? We do have some comments that are coming through on Twitter. Some of you are asking the doctor, for example, Tweheo David on Twitter, you're saying, mine is to thank Dr. Besigye, the work he's doing to change Uganda. Where Uganda is now, it's because of you, Dr. Besigye. And he's basically saying that you started a good picture for opposition. Where is it right now? And so David seems to be, if you can make a short comment.
Yeah,
on
well,
David's
first of all,
statement.
thank you for that kind remark, but it's not correct that the situation where it is just because of me, because I mean, I'm just one tiny person. I think it's the effort of a hell lot of people and sacrifices of a hell lot of people. I may be slightly more visible, but not necessarily the most, contributing in this effort. As you know, you may have heard, for example, the young man I used to work with, Sam Mugumya, has just been released from an 8-year imprisonment in the Congo for no other reason but this struggle. Just a short while earlier, another young man, Moses Kamuswaga, was released out of 10 years in jail, and so on and so forth. Many have died. Many have died trying to cause this change. So the change that is there is a contribution of so many people and a lot more sacrifice is certainly needed to get to where we are going.
Okay.
You know, a short while back I saw somebody saying that you know, these people have lost their lives. You know, somebody has spent 8 years of his life in jail. What am I, Besigye, going to do for him? And, you know, to make sure he recovers and so on. People must understand that we, including myself, are in this struggle not for anybody. Nobody should come to this struggle for me. Certainly. We should all come to this struggle for our country. We should all contribute to the extent we can. Should not be coerced to sacrifice beyond what we can.
Okay.
And we hope that the reward will be living in a country in which we can enjoy the full range of rights and freedoms, where we can share into the opportunities, the great opportunities that this country provides equally, you know. So we have a cause to struggle for, all of us, and we should be prepared and ready to sacrifice for that cause.
Turning to the pages of Ebola, as we speak, in the last 48 hours, you've had cases rising in the Greater Kampala, which is absurd. From the presidential addresses that we had last week, the president did commit that that will not be the case, especially for the metropolitan area. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So seemingly Ebola has held the Uganda health system at ransom as we speak. It's a situation that we believe they're doing their best to handle it. Some areas have been put under total lockdown as one of the mitigating ways to handle this Ebola surge. But how can we have better intervention?
You see, sometimes I think that Uganda may, you know, may thrive better without a government than the government we have.
What does the government have to do with this?
Because you see, the reason a government exists is to plan and deliver public goods and services that are not possible to be delivered by an individual and their effort. An individual or a combination of individual by their efforts. So the hallmark of government is common public goods and services. And to do that, you must have a plan. And emergencies are planned for also, you know. I don't know whether we are not aware that another pandemic will come beyond Ebola. We are going to get another pandemic. We should not have waited for COVID to plan for COVID. We should have a plan for emergencies. We should have a plan to fight fire if this building is engulfed by fire, which can come up from any part of this building. Now, we have a government, but I don't think, you know, people who are knowledgeable, informed like you who are in the media, that you can tell me the plan of Uganda for the next pandemic. Because it's not there. There is, you know, that's what I was telling them, that okay, now COVID has come, let's at least make a plan. And throughout, you know, there was bungling left and right, and that's how nobody was aware how, for example, the lockdown would end. So they called lockdown. So what we have locked down to do what? What should be done? A, B, C, D. If they are achieved, then the lockdown ends. No Ugandan knew. You know, that's how schools could not open for 2 years, because there was no plan. Even on going back, there was no plan for their going back. So what we really need is a plan. And this plan for a pandemic or an epidemic these are, sometimes confusing words, but it all means that it's an emergency at a health emergency at a fairly large scale, maybe engulfing a region or a country, and if it is in many countries, then we call it a pandemic. And the bottom line of managing any such health emergency must be focused on the community. You must have competencies in the community, which you have planned for, So, one, to prevent the emergency happening, the pandemic or the epidemic happening. What is your plan to prevent its occurrence? What is your plan to detect when it comes up, that you immediately detect it? People were dying in Mubende for quite some time before
it was realized
that there is Ebola, So what is the plan for detection in the community? What is the plan for response once it has been detected? So you must have a plan for prevention, you must have a plan for detection, you must have a plan for responding to the emergency once it comes up. These plans must not only be there and comprehensive, they must be known to the public. They must be known to the communities, because it is at the end of the day the public, the communities, who will be critical in implementation of these plans, whether it is the prevention, whether it is the detection, whether it is the actual response to the emergency. And so you had, for example, this man who died in Kirudu. He had been detected in Mubende. In spite of the detection, he was able to go away, to come to Ruero, stay there for some time, interacting with the
community,
the local doctors and the community. Of course, he came by public means from to Ruero.
Okay.
From Ruero, I don't know whether he went by Boda Boda or whatever to Kirudu until he died in Kirudu. And then you had the government, trying very much to say this epidemic is not in Kampala. When somebody has been in Kampala, has died in Kampala, and you are busy trying to say no, there is no Ebola in Kampala, simply because maybe you don't want some tourists not to come or whatever, because you did not have a plan to manage this pandemic. So really, we are on our own in terms especially of health care. And this is one of the most cardinal public goods that any government can deliver to a country. Public good, health. It cannot be done at an individual level. It cannot be done it must be done by all of us. It must be funded by all of us. So two things are lacking here: a plan and the resources to back that plan. If you prioritize it, you must prioritize the budget that runs that plan. So you must prioritize the human resource that implements all these budgets. For example, there is something which was a progressive plan, I believe, of starting the village health teams, creating VHTs. These village health teams would be what you can possibly call, like volunteers in the village, which is an extremely important thing for the community detection and community response. But these village health teams, if they are to be effective, they must be well trained, they must be continually refreshed, they must be hooked into...
And in reference to that, I was challenged most recently. I had an engagement with Ambassador US to Uganda. Now, the thing is that they had already started conducting Ebola trainings in 2019. And I asked myself, did they know that in 2022 that would be the case? But simply because they have taken into keen understanding of the health environment within the country in which they're doing their due diligence, and they know that some of the things that will continuously come through are diseases like Ebola. Therefore, let's equip our staff and people out there so that just in case anything relatedly does come to ground, they are readily prepared.
Yes,
versus us Ugandans,
yes, that is
emergency.
That is very, very important. So not only must you have the infrastructure must be equipped with knowledge and with the tools to be effective. And there must be linkages, the appropriate linkages for this system to exist. I have always argued that the healthcare system starts by having knowledge of the people that system is supposed to care for. You know, every citizen should be known, identifiable by the healthcare system. So even these, when you talk about like a village health team, the village health team must have good knowledge of the people in the village and the kind of issues that they have in those villages, and this knowledge should be linked to the health centers and the health providing system of the country. One area in these primary responders in the villages, which I think is a bit overlooked here, is that of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. These are, again, volunteers who are, but you know, the Red Cross, because it is linked to the International Red Cross
even the World Health Organization
and International Red Crescent.
Ground.
Yes, you know, so these, if they were, you know, integrated more into the healthcare system that we have, could possibly play a greater role. But the bottom line is that there must be a plan. You must have resources, and you must have motivated human resource to implement the plan.
All right, last question, the comment on the current government. 7 days ago, we did have a faction that's saying, no, Jaja, you must continue until you can continue no more. There's another faction, which is the MK Army, that continues to have its groundwork being done left, right, and center. What do you make of the political succession for the current?
All of those are antics, really they are antics of a dying junta. And I think those antics should not take a lot of our time and attention. There is no Muhoozi, there is no Museveni, they are all the same junta, you know. They are all the same personification of pain of the people of Uganda. Doesn't matter how you present it, it's just the same.
Okay.
And we should just, as I have said, simply organize to throw the whole lot out of office and for the country to move on.
All right.
They are not the future. They do not represent the future. There is an attempt to say the young Moses is a young generation. This is not a generational struggle. No. This is actually a liberation struggle, not a generation struggle, not a succession process, a liberation struggle to liberate the country from evil forces, people who use force to control the country.
In conclusion, as we're talking about the liberation and how it should be for the people, to the people, and by the people, you did make a comment and you say that it all starts with the population. So in your concluding remarks, how can it start with today's population?
By those who are better informed within the population, those who receive what we are saying and understand it, to do their utmost to influence others around them, to all understand what we are faced with and what we all collectively need to do to resolve the huge problem that is before us. Fortunately, and very encouragingly, after nearly 4 decades, really the NRM Museveni junta is on its knees. It has a collapsed economy. It has the dissatisfaction in the country that is palpable everywhere. You know, people desperate, you know, who need change, including those who sustain the regime, the military, the police, the security institutions. They are also desperate for change. The greatest majority of them, they are fed up after 40 years of living in shacks, you know, in unlivable conditions. They also want change. So all we need is simply to unite and procure the change that the country urgently needs and deserves.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. Uniting and procuring the change that we all deserve as Ugandans. Now that takes the population, which is you and myself. And of course, in regards to the opposition, and are they having self-interest